Welcome everyone of Group B to the AiiDA virtual tutorial of 2021. My name is Marnik and I'm a postdoc at EPFL in the group of Professor Mazari. And to start the tutorial off, of course, I want to welcome you all and thank you for joining us this week. I'll start with a little presentation here on an overview of the tutorial, starting with you, the participants, a bit of details on where you come from and what you are doing. Then I'll move to the format and schedule and give an overview there. Then I'll give some more practical information and I'll wrap up my brief presentation with the theme and the sponsors of this event. So looking at the position of the participants, we can see that we have quite a diverse group. However, the vast majority of you is either a PhD student or a postdoc. But we also have some professors, master students, bachelor students, industry R&D, and others joining us today. So that's very nice to see. Looking at the experience of the participants, we can see that most of you already have a medium familiarity with Python, which will definitely come in handy. Some are more on the basic or just started using Python. This is perfectly fine. You simply have to make sure that you learn the skills needed. And for this, we have added these little text in the margins that point towards certain tutorials on certain concepts of Python. So you can use those to brush up some concepts you might need throughout the tutorial. The vast majority of you have no experience or very little experience with AiiDA, which is of course exactly what we want to see because we want to have new users join and start using AiiDA for tutorials. In the margins, we also have these little further reading notes where you can have a look at more documentation. However, we do recommend that you stick with just following the main material of the tutorial and leave this for after the hands-on sessions. Now, we're very happy to see that we have a very diverse audience today with participants from over 30 different countries. India is strongly represented, and so is Germany, China, and I also see Brazil is quite common here. So, of course, all of these different nationalities are spread all over the world. And so we have participants from over 20 different time zones. And this is why we decided beforehand, of course, to basically provide two different versions of different sessions for each hands-on session. So we can cover all of these different time zones all over the world. And so in this format, we have pre-recorded talks that are available on YouTube. Some of those you need to watch before the hands-on sessions. You can check the tutorial website to see which ones you have to watch for which day. Then there's also contributed talks at the bottom of the web page, and these you can watch at any time. But there will be a Q&A session with the contributed talk presenters on Friday. So make sure that you've watched the ones you're interested in before then. Of course, the hands-on sessions will be organized via Zoom meetings, as you are all well aware. The first hands-on will start with a Q&A session where you can ask questions about corresponding presentations for that day. And after that, you will be able to just work at your own pace. We'll give us a brief introduction of the material, but then we'll just let you work and you can ask questions, of course. You can ask questions in Zoom and we won't ignore them, but we do recommend that you use a Slack workspace for this. So try to ask the questions in Slack instead of Zoom. If you get stuck at any point and you might need some one-on-one assistance to continue, we also can provide breakout rooms where basically we can send in a tutor to help you on so you can share your screen and explain what's going wrong, and we can help you get along and continue working on the material. So here you can see a complete overview of the tutorial schedule for both groups with on top the presentation that you have to watch for the corresponding day. But let's zoom in on this a little bit and go over the different hands-on sessions, giving a brief explanation of each. So as I've already mentioned, we'll start each session for the case of Group B at 1700 Central European Summertime with a Q&A session for the talks of that corresponding day. Then we'll move today on to making sure that everyone has been able to connect to AiiDA Lab. So we'll give a brief explanation already of the material so everyone can get started that's already connected. But those that have not, make sure that you communicate to us that you've had any kind of issue with the connection to Jupyter Hub so we can resolve this as soon as possible, and you can get started with working on the hands-ons. Then the first hands-on is on just getting started with AiiDA. It's basically a bird's eye overview of the different concepts in AiiDA, just starting with some very basic calculations to begin with. For the second hands-on, after the break, we'll continue with more on running processes, and we'll be running quantum espresso calculations for this, both running simple calculations and already extensive workflows. Tomorrow, we'll move on to looking at how you can manage all the data that you're producing in the second session by organizing them using groups and then querying these groups and the specific data using the query builder. After breakdown, there's no hands-on session planned. Instead, we will have a virtual social event, which will be basically a bit of a scientific speed dating session, but I'll send you more information on this later today. Wednesday is all about writing workflows. So we'll start with the first hands-on on just the basics on writing work functions and work chains. And then after break, we'll move to some more advanced concepts, so as trying to debug your work chain, some real-world examples, and dealing with errors and such. And the final real hands-on session is on creating plugins presented by Leopold. And there you will learn how you can interface your code that you're interested in running with AiiDA with the AiiDA plugin system. Then the second hands-on session of Thursday is a bit different. Here we will try to make sure that everyone, for now, you've basically been running on the Jupyter Hub cluster. But at that point, we want to move towards having you use your own machine for running AiiDA, because it can sometimes be a bit of a challenge or a process to install this. So we'll make sure that everyone is able to install AiiDA on their machine. And also we'll have a look at running on your remote cluster, so you can already install the code that you want to run in AiiDA and set it up. And finally, of course, the Q&A on Friday is for the contributed talks. So make sure you've watched some of them, or at least the ones you're interested in. And then the final day will be all about just getting you to work on the work chain or the plugin that you're interested in. So basically, we'll organize a bit of a hackathon where we'll give some suggestions for a project to work on, but you can also completely decide to do your own thing. And we'll be there to help you out as much as possible so you can get started really doing your scientific work with AiiDA. And then finally, we'll wrap up on Friday. Well, it will be late evening for us, but it will depend, of course, where you are, with some closing remarks and then links to the feedback form. So this is very important for us, of course, on the one hand, to be able to improve the material for our tutorials, and on the other hand, to make sure that we can report this to our funding institutions, whose sponsoring, of course, makes these events possible. So a lot of work has been done this year round on modularizing all of the hands-on content. So instead of just having large hands-on sessions, we now have basically put different content in modules that are part of a certain top-level unit. For example, here you can see the writing workflows units, which talks about work functions, work chains, etc., etc. Important here is that these basic modules at the top of these pages need to be executed first before moving on to more advanced modules. So you have to execute them, preferably in a linear sense. And then you can continue basically at your own leisure with doing the other tutorials. Now the main units in the beginning, you can just complete all of them. For later hands-on sessions, you might not be able to have the time to do all of the modules. We'll have to see. That's the practical information. As you are all well aware, of course, we are organizing Zoom meetings for all the hands-on sessions. And since you're here, you know that the details have been provided by email as well as on Slack. And the material itself, you will actually run on the Jupyter Hub cluster, for which we've also sent you the login details. You have to authenticate yourself with a GitHub account here. So if you haven't made one, then try to do so as quickly as possible. Because all the materials should be executed on these Jupyter Hub clusters. You can also do this on your own machine in principle, but we, of course, have tested everything on these Jupyter Hub clusters. So here we are sure everything works. Then I'll still give some tips about Zoom meetings. Maybe some of you are already very familiar with Zoom after more than a year of pandemic. But for those that are not, in the bottom left of your screen, you can find the mute and start video buttons. But of course, you can unmute yourself in case you want to ask a question, for example, during the Q&A sessions. You can also share your video. And in general, we, of course, appreciate it if you do so, because it's nice to see the reactions of all the participants. Don't worry about not looking fresh at any time, because I think after this week, you definitely won't be in a position to judge. There's also the Zoom chat, which you can see the icon for here. But as I've already mentioned, the Slack chat is preferred because it's a persistent chat, and it also has nicer features, just a code snippet, so it's easier to communicate and answer questions in the Slack chat. Now, moving to the other features, we also, as I mentioned, have the ability to open breakout rooms. You can now, at this point, with the latest Zoom versions, just simply join the rooms yourself. So if there's a certain problem, for example, you are stuck at a certain point in the tutorial, the tutor will say, I'm going to move into Zoom room number 1. And then you simply join the same Zoom room. And there you can then share your screen. So you can easily solve your issue by just looking at what's going wrong directly on the machine. And finally, don't forget about the reactions. There's also this nice reactions key that allows you to clap or give a thumbs up. It's always nice for a presenter to get a little feedback and make sure that everyone's still keeping up to date with the tutorial material. And I've already mentioned quite a bit, of course, this Slack workspace, where for us, it's much easier to communicate certain things compared to just your typical email. Most important here is that we set up a whole bunch of different channels. So we've set up channels for, on the one hand, asking questions. So here you have basically for all of the different units, its corresponding channel. And watch out here for day 1, we have both the getting started unit, which is the AiiDA basic section, and the running processes unit. So make sure that you ask the question of a corresponding unit in the right channel. We've also set up some group channels where we can communicate, for example, reminders and the Zoom meeting details, as was already done. So make sure that you join the channel of the corresponding group, in this case B. Then we've also set up some channels where you can share some more, let's say, fun stuff, some social stuff, such as, on the one hand, something from your country. You can post a recipe that you like, a piece of music, whatever you feel like sharing, you can all post it in the culture channel. And then a bit more on the professional side, you can also share, for example, your work or an article that you've read that it's interesting in the science channel, so others can have a look and see if they're interested or not. Now, I've already mentioned the social events. So after today's hands-on sessions, I'll send you some more information about that. So make sure to check your email as well as the Slack channel for Group B. As I've already mentioned, the connection to the Jupyter Hub cluster will be done via GitHub. And once you log in, you get something that looks like this. Basically, on the left here, you have a different file manager, and on the right, you have room for putting different panels. So this can be a terminal, it can be an IPython console, or a Jupyter notebook. Maybe I can quickly show you live what this looks like. So here you can see what you should be able to see. Maybe you'll have some of the light version. That's definitely possible. Maybe I should switch to that so it looks more familiar. And on the left here, you have the file manager. So in case you don't see it, you can always click on this little folder button, and then you can see all different files. You can open a new terminal by clicking on this plus button here. Simply open it. And then, of course, you can organize this however you want by simply dragging things around and making sure that you have the layout that you like for your work. Opening file is very easy. You just click on the file or double click on the file in this file manager on the left. And then you can see here already a bit of a more complex workflow that I've been running as a demonstration for this tutorial. So that should be pretty straightforward. One tip might be, you can, of course, run everything in the IPython shell and in the terminal. Yes, there's a dark version. But maybe some things are better to do in a Jupyter notebook. So here you can, of course, have these code cells. And this is something I'll also put in the Slack. And maybe I've already done it in the general. But here you can basically load a bunch of AiiDA methods and classes, similar to what you get for the Verde shell, by adding a bit of IPython magic here at the top. Just a quick percentage sign and then AiiDA, and then you have all these classes loaded. So then you can do load tab, for example, and you get load code, load group, load computer, all of that. Also, something that might be interesting is that you can also execute bash commands in this IPython notebook. You can just start with an exclamation point, do Verde status, and there you go. All green check marks. That's what we like to see. This is a quite useful environment for working on a tutorial material. Just be careful that you don't run the same notebook with everything in over and over, because you might be creating a lot of nodes in your database that way. So watch out for that. All right, going back to my presentation. all that's left for me to do is just to show you the list of people who have contributed to this event, either by organization, being present as tutors to answer questions, the contributed talks, of course, and then the support team for more technical things in administration. I would like to express my deep gratitude to all of these people for their hard work, else this event would have been impossible to organize by just myself, obviously. And of course, I'd also like to thank the sponsors for providing the required funding for these events. And finally, here's a little bit of an overview of the AiiDA and Materials Cloud teams at EPFL and in other parts of the world. So thank you for your attention. We'll now move to the Q&A session, where you can either ask questions about my presentation here, or simply more general questions about Francisco's presentation, which you all should have watched by now. So the floor is yours. Just unmute your microphone to ask a question, or put it in the Zoom chat if you're more comfortable with that, or even the Slack. But I would say that for the actual Q&As, it makes perhaps more sense just to unmute yourself and put it in the Zoom chat. So, are there any questions? So this can be either about the organizational tutorial. If everything is clear there, then I've done a good job and I'm very happy. But you can also ask questions about AiiDA. You can make it more general. Just don't be shy. Let us know what you want to know.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, my name is Ahmed Mamran. I have a question related to running the code. So we will run it from this Jupyter Lab, as I understand. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, because there we've already installed a whole bunch of things that will make it easier to run the tutorial.
Yes, but is it possible later to start to run it on our, for example, workstation or PC?
Definitely. On Thursday,
yes.
On Thursday, the second hands-on session is all dedicated to basically installing AiiDA on your own workstation, getting codes set up for your remote clusters for your server computers. So then on Friday, you can just work entirely on your own machine. And then after this week, of course, you're all completely set up and ready to start using AiiDA.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions?
If no one asks, well, I have just a small one. How can I change the theme from the white to the dark one? Because this is really bright.
All right, no, that's a very important question. I understand. Can you still see my screen right now?
Yeah, I can see.
So just going into settings, Jupyter Lab theme and Jupyter Lab dark.
Okay.
And there you go, you're in the dark theme. I agree, I prefer the dark theme as well. Typically, I also install more themes, but you can install extensions on this one. So unfortunately, I'm stuck with the regular one, but it's already better than the light theme. I definitely agree.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions?
I do have one quick question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just, so I noticed that you have a section downloading our data, right? So
yes.
From the server. So will files persist like between sessions? So do we need to download things at the end of each day, or is it just things will be gone at the end of the tutorial?
Exactly, at the end of the tutorial. And so we plan to start shutting down the machine on Friday at like almost midnight Central European summertime. So basically the Friday, if everything goes according to plan, you'll be working on your own machine. So you have a whole day to just download this data.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we still have some more time for questions. So if you have any, don't hesitate to ask. If not, then I would happily pass.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a question. I'd like to ask about how can I download the file that I'm interested to?
Okay, if you, for example, here, this file, you want to download a specific one file to your own machine. So this is also quite easy. You can just right click, and then you get this menu here. You can rename them, you can delete files, all that stuff, good stuff. And then you just click on downloads, and then you can download here. And if you click on it, you can open it. This might indeed be handy if you want to look at these more complex, provenance graph that you might be generating. So I understand indeed if you want to do that.
Okay.
If you have any more questions,
of folders, I need to zip them first. Yes.
In case of folders, actually, I haven't tried it, but I think so. Yeah. So you'll just have to open a terminal, put them in a tarball or in a zip, and then you can just download everything. Okay.
Okay.
If there are more than one, but not too many, you can also just select them with Shift click or Control click or Command click if you are on a Mac. And then if you right click and do download, it will download multiple files in one go. But it's up to you. If you really have many, maybe it's easier to go on a terminal, create a tar file, and then download the tar file.
Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome. And I'll just ask once more.
There is a question by Daniel, just to confirm that the Zoom link will be the same for the whole week. So
yes,
there are different groups, but just reuse the same one tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.